They called her the poor girl before she even touched the mic. I heard it from the bleachers, not whispered, but tossed around like a joke. My stomach turned, but I couldn't move. She stood under that harsh gym light, clutching her old guitar, the one we found at a yard sale for $10. Her dress was secondhand, her shoes a size too big, yet she stood there anyway. The laughter rolled through the room, sharp and cruel, and I sat frozen, wondering if courage always had to look this painful. Ruby had been practicing that song for weeks, sometimes before school, sometimes after dinner, when the radiator clanged louder than her guitar. I used to listen from the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes just to hear her voice carry through the thin walls. It wasn't perfect. Her chords buzzed, her pitch cracked. But she sang with something I hadn't heard in a long time: belief. We didn't have much. Our little apartment sat above a laundromat that never slept. At night, the hum of machines became her metronome. Her guitar came from a yard sale. The man sold it for $10 because one string was missing. Ruby didn't complain. She fixed it herself with fishing lines, smiling like she'd just built something brand new. She said music made the small room feel bigger. When the school announced the annual Jefferson Middle Talent Show, she taped the flyer to the fridge. "I think I want to do it," she said, trying to sound casual. I looked at her hair pulled back. Sleeves rolled that spark in her eyes, and I knew she'd already decided. I warned her gently, "Those kids can be cruel." She shrugged. "Maybe, but I'll never know if I don't try." In the days before the show, our home turned into a rehearsal space. She'd practice between homework and dinner, her voice breaking between verses, always starting again. I stitched the small tear on the lavender dress we found at the thrift store. It wasn't new, but when she tried it on, she spun once and said, "This'll do." She never cared about how things looked. She cared about what they meant. The night before the show, I sat by her bed while she tuned the guitar. "You nervous?" I asked. She smiled soft and fearless, a little. "But Miss Parker says I don't need perfect things to be amazing." I didn't know then how much that sentence would matter. The next morning, the gym was packed. Glitter banners hung crookedly, the air thick with excitement and perfume. Kids posed for photos in shiny dresses and suits. Parents carried cameras like trophies. Ruby stood beside me, holding her guitar case with both hands. Her shoes, borrowed from her cousin, flopped slightly as she walked. Still, her chin was high. When her name was called, she squeezed my fingers once and whispered, "I'll be okay, Mom." I believed her. I wanted to. The gym smelled like floor wax and cotton candy, that strange mix of nerves and sugar that only school events seem to have. The bleachers groaned under the weight of parents and students' phones, ready to capture every moment. I found a seat near the back, close enough to see her face, but far enough that she couldn't see mine shaking. One by one, the performances went on: polished routines, bright costumes, rehearsed smiles. A girl sang a pop song with a band behind her. A boy juggled while his friends cheered. Every act got applause, laughter, a wave of support. And then the MC called the next name. Next up, Ruby Johnson. My daughter stepped into the light alone. Her lavender dress shimmered faintly under the stage bulbs, not because it was fancy, but because she stood tall. The gym fell quiet, but not the good kind. I heard a few whispers from the front rows. Someone snorted. Another kid muttered, "Oh, this should be good." The laughter spread like static. Ruby kept walking. Her guitar looked too big for her small shoulders. She reached the mic stand, adjusted it just like we'd practiced, and exhaled. From where I sat, I could see her knuckles white around the pick. I wanted to scream at them to stop, to tell those kids that courage looks different when you've never had anything handed to you. But I stayed seated, nails digging into my palms. She struck the first chord, a small, uneven sound. A few giggles erupted from the bleachers. My heart clenched. Ruby looked down, adjusted the tuning peg, and tried again. The second chord came smoother, but the laughter didn't stop. Someone whispered something, and another burst of snickering followed. For a second, I thought she'd walk off. Her shoulders trembled. The gym lights flickered against her face, catching the shimmer of unshed tears. She blinked hard, swallowed, and looked out into the crowd, not at anyone in particular, just forward as if searching for a point to hold on to. Then she took a breath. a long, steady one that made the microphone hum slightly. When she sang the first line, her voice cracked. I held my breath, but she didn't stop. Verse by verse, she found herself again. The crowd quieted, not out of respect yet, but confusion. Her voice, still fragile, began to fill the room. She sang about small apartments and starlight through broken windows, about holding on to dreams too big for her hands. Something shifted. Even from the back, I felt it, that fragile kind of silence that happens when people realize they might have misjudged someone. I could see Miss Parker, her teacher, sitting 2 rows ahead. She leaned forward, smiling through tears. Ruby closed her eyes, hands steady now, her voice climbing higher with every word. But just as she reached the chorus, the microphone squealed feedback, blaring through the speakers. The spell broke. Laughter returned quick and cruel, and that's when I saw her lip tremble, her fingers falter. For the first time that night, I thought she might break. The feedback screeched like a warning siren piercing through the gym. A few kids covered their ears dramatically. Someone shouted, "Nice one," and laughter followed louder this time, careless and cruel. I gripped the metal railing in front of me, the sound of it cold and biting against my palms. Ruby froze. Her shoulders rose and fell, her breath ragged. For a moment, everything inside me wanted to run to her, to stop it all, to take the guitar from her hands, shield her and carry her out of that gym. But something in her stillness stopped me. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She just stood there staring at the floor like she was deciding something. The MC looked uncertain, glancing toward the judges' table. One of them started to stand, maybe to end the performance, but Ruby suddenly lifted her head. Her eyes found the microphone again. She spoke softly, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "Sorry," she said. "I can start over." The room went quiet, not respectful yet, but expectant, like the audience waiting for another reason to laugh. Ruby adjusted the strap on her shoulder, reached down, and struck the strings again. This time, the sound was cleaner. She took a breath and began to sing from the top. Her voice was low at first, cracked around the edges, but there was something in it, a kind of quiet defiance, that made me sit straighter. Each word carried weight now. I could hear the quiver in her throat when she sang about nights too cold for sleep, about hearing her mother's tired footsteps, and promising herself it would get better. My throat tightened. I hadn't known she'd written about me. Somewhere in the crowd, a cough echoed, then faded. No laughter this time. Even the kids who'd snickered earlier leaned forward, watching. Her voice grew stronger. It wasn't perfect. It wavered, missed a note, but it was raw and true. And that truth filled the gym like a rising tide. The harsh, fluorescent lights softened somehow. Even the banners on the walls seemed to fade into the background. I saw her fingers move with confidence now. The pick no longer shook. The last of her fear burned away in that song, replaced by something fierce and real. When she hit the final chord, the sound lingered longer than it should have, heavy, electric, alive. Then silence. Pure, suspended silence. That's when I noticed him, the man in the back row, standing slowly, his coat dark against the bleachers, watching my daughter with eyes that saw something no one else did. He didn't clap. He didn't move quickly either. He just stood there, calm and deliberate, as the crowd started to murmur. I remember thinking he looked out of place too, composed for a room filled with teenagers shifting in embarrassment. His coat was dark, long, and worn at the cuffs, like it had seen more years than anyone in that gym. Ruby noticed him too. She blinked once, confused, still holding her guitar like a shield. Then the man spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried low, steady cutting through the silence, like it belonged there. "Play it again," he said. At first no one moved. The principal frowned, unsure if he should interfere. Someone whispered, "Who is that guy?" Another student snickered nervously, but the man didn't flinch. "Play it again," he repeated, eyes still on Ruby. I felt my breath catch. Ruby's fingers hovered above the strings. "Sir," she asked, small but clear. He took a step forward, the echo of his shoes snapping in the silence. From the top, he said, "You were finding your truth. Don't stop now." For a moment, it felt as if time forgot to move. Then Ruby nodded not to him exactly, but to herself, and lifted the guitar. The first chord rang out steadier this time. No one laughed. Even the kids who'd mocked her earlier sat frozen. The man closed his eyes, arms folded loosely, listening. Ruby sang again, her voice no longer a whisper, but a declaration. I could feel it building like a storm, finally forming into something powerful instead of chaotic. Every word came sharper, cleaner, as if she'd finally stopped asking for permission to be heard. The verses that once sounded fragile now hit like truth about hunger, about hope, about refusing to let other people's laughter define her worth. And somewhere in the middle of that second song, something in the room changed. The laughter that had filled that gym only minutes ago was gone. In its place, a stillness so heavy it almost vibrated. When she reached the chorus, the part she'd written alone in her room about stars leaking through cracks in the ceiling, her voice soared. I'd never heard her sing like that. Not at home, not in rehearsal, not ever. It wasn't the voice of a scared little girl. It was the voice of someone claiming her space. By the time the song ended, the gym wasn't quiet out of pity. It was quiet because no one dared to break what they'd just witnessed. Then, almost hesitantly, one teacher began to clap. Another joined. And then, like a wave rolling toward shore, the whole gym stood. Applause thundered through the rafters. I saw tears on Miss Parker's face. Even the boy who'd laughed first was clapping, now his cheeks flushed with shame. Ruby's lips parted in disbelief. She glanced at me just for a heartbeat, and I nodded, unable to speak. The man in the coat climbed the steps to the stage. The MC stepped back, letting him pass. When he reached Ruby, he smiled a small, knowing kind of smile. "You have a gift," he said into the mic, his voice calm but firm. And gifts like that deserve to be protected, not mocked. Whispers rippled through the audience. The principal looked both stunned and relieved that someone else had taken control. The man turned to the crowd. "My name is Daniel Carter. I produce music here in town. I've been doing this for a long time." He paused, scanning the rows of faces. "I came tonight because I heard there was a girl who reminded me of myself." He turned back to Ruby. "I grew up with nothing too. Music saved my life. And I think it can save yours." Ruby stared, frozen. I don't have any money," she said softly, almost apologizing. Daniel smiled wider, shaking his head. "You've already paid," he said, "with your courage." The gym erupted again, this time louder. Not just applause, but cheers. People who'd mocked her moments ago were now standing on benches shouting her name. I saw one of the teachers wiping her eyes, another filming on her phone. Ruby's knees looked weak, but her smile grew until it filled her whole face. For the first time that night, she looked free. Daniel stepped aside, letting her take the mic one last time. She hesitated, then said into the microphone, "Thank you for listening." Her voice cracked on the last word, and the room answered with another wave of applause that shook the walls. When she walked off the stage, I met her halfway. She didn't say anything at first, just collapsed into my arms, still shaking. Her hair smelled like dust and nerves. I whispered, "You did it, baby." She pulled back, tears and laughter tangled in her breath. "I thought I was going to run. I know I said, but you didn't." Behind us, Daniel Carter waited. He handed her a business card, his tone gentle. "Come by the studio this week. Let's record that song properly." Ruby looked at me as if asking for permission. I nodded again, though my throat burned. "We'll be there." As we left the gym, people kept stopping her kids who'd laughed earlier, now offering compliments that sounded like apologies. "You were amazing," one girl said, eyes wide. Ruby thanked her quietly, polite as ever. Outside, the spring air felt cold against our skin. She held her guitar case tight to her chest as if it were something sacred. When we reached the car, she looked back at the glowing gym windows and whispered, "Did that really happen?" "Yes," I said, unlocking the door. "It did." She smiled, small and tired. "Then I guess I'm not the poor girl anymore." I turned toward her, brushing her hair behind her ear. "You never were," I said. "They just couldn't see it yet." She leaned her head on the window as we drove home, humming softly. The melody was the same one she'd played on stage, but now it sounded lighter, full of space, like she'd finally made peace with every cracked note, every broken thing that brought her here. And in that quiet drive through the dark streets of Jefferson, I realized something too. Maybe courage isn't about standing alone under bright lights. Maybe it's about staying when every instinct tells you to run and watching the world finally stop to listen. Within a week, Daniel Carter called. True to his word, he invited Ruby to his studio, a narrow space above a bookstore walls covered in faded gold records and scribbled lyrics. The air smelled like coffee and old vinyl. Ruby sat in front of the mic, her guitar across her lap, the same one that had once squeaked under gym lights. Daniel adjusted the mic stand, smiling. "Just sing it like you did that night," he said. "Don't chase perfect, chase honest." She nodded, took a breath, and began. I watched from the doorway, hands pressed together. The sound that came out was gentler than before, but it carried something new, quiet confidence. Every imperfection felt intentional, every crack in her voice a piece of truth. When the last note faded, Daniel didn't speak for a moment. Then he whispered, "That's it." They uploaded the song that same evening. Within days, messages started appearing. People from other towns saying they'd heard it, that it made them cry, that it reminded them of being overlooked and finding strength anyway. Ruby didn't brag. She just smiled and said, "Guess people listen when it's real." The next talent show came and went, but we didn't go back. She was busy writing another song this time about hope. And every night as I washed the dishes, I could hear her humming, steady, fearless, and finally free. Years later, I returned to that same gym for an assembly where Ruby was invited to speak. She walked onto the stage taller, now surer, carrying a new guitar, but wearing the same quiet smile. The banners on the walls had faded, the bleachers scuffed, but the air felt different. When she finished performing, she turned to the students and said, "Be brave even when they call you names." Her voice filled the room, calm but unshakable. I felt tears rise, the same kind that burned the night she first sang there. Afterward, she signed her name on the backstage wall where performers leave their mark, then handed the marker to a shy girl clutching a borrowed violin. If you've ever watched someone you love get torn down, stand up for them. Speak kindness when the world chooses cruelty. You never know whose life you might change.
My name is Bethany Alexander. I'm 29. A graphic designer living in a mid-sized city that feels too small when your heart's been broken. Before everything fell apart, I used to think love was built on patience, that if you gave enough, stayed, kind enough things would balance out. I believed that with my whole soul. Leon was the kind of man who could make any room feel alive. He was a freelance writer, bright, charming, always chasing something bigger than himself. The problem was the something bigger never stayed the same for long. When we met, I loved his fire. He said I grounded him, kept him sane when deadlines piled up or editors ghosted him. And for a while, that balance worked. He'd get lost in his dreams, and I'd quietly hold our world together paying bills when his invoices were late bringing coffee, when he stayed up writing, believing we were a team. But love can turn one-sided without you noticing. 6 months before it ended, Leon took a side job bartending at a trendy lounge downtown. Just something temporary, he'd said. But soon his stories started sounding different. New friends, new nightlife, new energy. He'd come home smelling like whiskey and laughter eyes, bright but distant. I'd ask rough shift. He'd shrug, just tired. But I wasn't blind. His phone buzzed constantly, messages he'd hide with a quick flick of his thumb. When I asked who it was, he'd laugh. "You don't have to worry, Bethany. Not everyone's out to break your heart." I wish I'd realized then people only say that when they already have. The fights started small. Forgotten calls, missed dinners. Then came the digs. "You're always planning everything. Loosen up. You don't take risks. That's why your designs feel safe." Each word was a splinter. He was becoming someone else, and maybe I was too. The kind of woman who stared at her phone long after it stopped ringing, trying to convince herself things were fine. Then came that night. Our friend Mark hosted one of his famous house parties, crowded rooms, loud music, people everywhere, pretending life was perfect. I went because Leon insisted. I thought maybe it'd help us reconnect. I even wore the dress he once said made me look like trouble in a good way. But he barely noticed. He was across the room laughing too loudly with a blonde from his bar named Chloe. I saw the way his hand lingered at her waist when she whispered something in his ear. My stomach twisted, but I smiled anyway. The kind of smile women use when they're breaking inside. When I tried to approach, he turned and said, "Hey babe, this is Chloe. She actually understands what it's like to take risks." The air thickened around me. I forced a polite nod. "Nice to meet you," she smirked. "Oh, I've heard so much about you." Something about the way she said it told me everything I didn't want to know. I excused myself, went to the kitchen to breathe. A minute later, Leon followed, his eyes sharp, his tone colder than I'd ever heard. "Bethany, we need to talk." I swallowed hard. "Now," he gestured vaguely toward the crowd outside. "Might as well. Everyone knows anyway." Before I could speak, he stepped back, raising his voice just enough for others nearby to hear. "I can't do this anymore. You're safe, Bethany. Predictable. I need someone with ambition. Someone who isn't afraid to live." Then he laughed, turning toward Chloe. "Like her." The room went quiet. Someone turned down the music. Every pair of eyes in that kitchen burned into me. My throat went dry. "Leon," I whispered, "can we at least talk in private?" He shook his head. "Why?" "So you can make me feel guilty again. I'm done being the bad guy because you're afraid to change." For a moment, I thought I'd collapse. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it was trying to escape. But then something inside me, something tired and quiet, snapped into focus. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't beg. I just said calmly, "If that's what you want, I won't stop you." He looked startled, like he'd been waiting for drama that never came. That's the thing about cruel people, they feed off reactions. Deny them that, and they lose control. I turned, picked up my purse, and walked out. Behind me, someone whispered, "What just happened?" And then I heard Leon's laugh, sharp, forced. Out on the porch, the night air was cold against my skin. My hands trembled, but my face didn't. In that silence, with music muffled behind closed doors, I realized something no one teaches you about heartbreak. Sometimes the loudest goodbye is the one you never say out loud. I called a cab, went home, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the blank wall where his sketches used to hang. I felt hollow, but beneath the ache was something else, a flicker of relief. It wasn't strength yet, just the first breath after drowning. But that was the night I stopped being the woman waiting for someone else to choose her, and started learning how to choose myself. The next morning, the sunlight felt wrong, too bright, too steady for a world that had just ended. Leon's toothbrush was still in the holder, his mug on the counter, a half-empty bottle of cologne by the sink. I stood there staring at those things, realizing that sometimes heartbreak isn't loud or cinematic. Sometimes it's just clutter that doesn't belong to you anymore. By noon, I'd packed his things into boxes. Folded shirts, books, even that stupid typewriter he swore made his writing more authentic. I left everything neatly by the door, taped a note on top that said, "You wanted a new life. Here's a clean start." Then I left before I could change my mind. I found a tiny studio apartment across town, peeling paint, a single narrow window, and walls that echoed when I spoke, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a takeout box and silence. No constant phone buzzing, no sighs of disappointment, no pretending. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and a quiet that was both haunting and healing. I didn't cry much, not yet. The tears came later at random, folding laundry, hearing a song, walking past the cafe we used to visit. Grief hides in the smallest corners. At work, I buried myself in design projects. I'd always been good, steady, reliable, but I'd let Leon's chaos consume my focus. Now I stayed late, pitched new ideas, said yes to projects I used to think were above my pay grade. My boss noticed. "You've been sharper lately, Bethany," he said one evening, as I handed over a rebrand proposal. "Keep that fire going." Funny, I thought. The fire Leon said I lacked. But it wasn't easy. Nights were the hardest. That's when the memories tried to crawl back in. His laugh, his arms, the promises that aged faster than milk. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering to myself, "You're not broken. You're rebuilding." To shake off the emptiness, I joined a gym near my apartment. It was a small, no-frills place, sweaty loud, filled with people chasing their own kinds of redemption. The first day, I almost walked out. I felt awkward, out of place, like I didn't belong in a world of steel and mirrors. But then I thought about Leon's smirk when he used to joke about my comfortable lifestyle as if stability was something to mock, and I stayed. At first, I could barely last 20 minutes without gasping. My arms ached, my legs burned, but that pain felt clean. I wasn't lifting weights. I was lifting pieces of myself back together. Weeks blurred into months. My body started changing. My posture straightened. My reflection looked less like someone who'd been discarded and more like someone quietly reclaiming her strength. Even my smile, small but real, started coming back. Friends reached out here and there. Mark texted, "Hey, game night soon." "Don't worry, Leon won't be there." I almost said no. But then I thought, why should I keep shrinking just because he couldn't handle me? So I went. It was awkward at first. People avoided saying his name, tiptoeing around the story they'd all heard. But after a few drinks and some laughter, the heaviness began to lift. I wasn't Leon's ex in that room anymore. I was Bethany again. Still late at night, the old doubts sometimes returned. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was too safe, too predictable, too easy to walk away from. But then I'd remember that quiet moment on the porch, the calm that came after humiliation. That was strength, not weakness. One night after a long gym session, I sat in my car and finally let it all out. The anger, the humiliation, the confusion. I cried until my chest ached, until the rearview mirror blurred with tears. And then in the middle of that breakdown, a strange kind of peace arrived. He'd broken something in me, yes, but I was the one rebuilding it. Stronger, sharper, on my own terms. From then on, I treated every sunrise as proof he didn't ruin me. He freed me. And somewhere between the sweat, the silence, and the sound of my own heartbeat, I stopped waiting for closure because I realized the real closure isn't an apology. It's the moment you stop needing one. By the time autumn rolled around, I'd built something close to peace. Not perfect, never perfect, but steady. My studio had plants now, my walls had framed prints from projects I was proud of, and my laughter didn't sound forced anymore. I'd started freelancing on the side, taking on branding clients who liked my bold colors and clean lines. The confidence that Leon once mocked had quietly become my currency. I was no longer someone's supporting act. I was my own headline. Then, one Friday night, after wrapping a client call, I got a message from Mark. "Hey, heads up. Leon's been having issues at the bar. Word is he's been fighting with that girl, Chloe." "You didn't hear it from me. Okay." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a flicker of something I couldn't name. It wasn't satisfaction. Not quite. More like recognition. The kind of chaos he'd chased had finally turned around to bite him. I didn't reply, just locked my phone and got back to work. But the universe has a cruel sense of humor, because the next week he texted me. "Leon. Hey, Bethany. Been a while. How are you? Miss talking to you." My chest tightened, not from longing, but from disbelief. Miss talking. After humiliating me in public and replacing me within hours, I stared at the screen, remembering his words from that night. I need someone with ambition. Someone who isn't afraid to live. Now here he was, crawling back like nothing had happened. I deleted the message without replying. A few days later, another one came. "Look, I know I hurt you, but I was confused. Things with Chloe aren't what I expected. She's different. I made a mistake." He wanted a reaction, a thread of empathy to pull. But he'd taught me something valuable: silence can be louder than words. So I blocked the number. That should have been the end of it, except he didn't stop. He found new ways to reach me. Unknown numbers, emails, even a DM on my work account of all places. The tone changed every time, sweet, remorseful, angry, desperate. "Don't ignore me, Bethany. You're proving I was right. You are cold." That one made me laugh out loud. He still didn't get it. Refusing to be his emotional crutch wasn't cruelty. It was healing. Then came the phone call from a number I didn't recognize. "Bethany, it's Lena." It took me a second to place the name. Leon's sister. We'd spoken maybe twice in all the years I'd been with him. Her voice was sharp, impatient. "Listen, my brother's going through hell. Chloe kicked him out. He's sleeping on friends' couches, and he won't stop talking about you. Maybe you could, I don't know, talk to him. Help him get his head straight." I took a slow breath, staring out the window at the rain streaking the glass. "Lena, with all due respect, Leon made his choices. I'm not the solution to them." She scoffed. "You always were too proud. He's miserable, and you're just ignoring him." That old familiar guilt tried to creep in, the kind that used to make me clean up his messes, apologize for his anger. But not this time. I'm not ignoring him, I said quietly. I just stopped letting him use me as a safety net. Before she could reply, I ended the call. The rain kept falling. Outside, the world looked gray and distant, but inside my little apartment, it was warm. I lit a candle, made tea, and sat by the window, listening to the city hum. That night, I wrote something in my journal that I still come back to. When people show you their fire, don't try to warm yourself with it. Walk away before it burns you again. The next few weeks proved that walking away had been the right choice. Through mutual friends, I heard bits and pieces how Leon had been yelling at Chloe during her shifts, how he'd been drinking more than working. The bar manager finally fired him after a public argument that ended with broken glasses and someone calling security. People stopped mentioning his name around me after that, and honestly, I didn't miss it. But one night while scrolling through my phone, a new message popped up. This one wasn't from him, it was from his sister again. You might not care, but Leon's a mess. He's broke depressed and blaming everyone but himself. He said you ruined him by cutting him off. Happy now. I didn't respond. I just put my phone face down and exhaled. Because I wasn't happy, not in a cruel way, but I was free, and that was worth everything. Still, somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd hear from him. Men like Leon don't just vanish quietly. They circle back when their chaos runs out of fuel. And I could feel it in my bones. He wasn't done trying to pull me back into his fire. It happened on a Tuesday. Ordinary day emails, coffee gone cold, my desk covered with sketches for a new client rebrand. I'd finally gotten my routine down, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. Then my receptionist buzzed through the intercom. Bethany, there's someone here asking for you. Says it's urgent. I frowned. Who? A pause. Then hesitantly, he said his name's Leon. My stomach dropped. Of course. The universe couldn't let me have one peaceful Tuesday. I almost told her to send him away, but some part of me, the part that wanted closure or maybe just wanted to look him in the eye, one last time, said I'll be right down. The elevator ride to the lobby felt longer than usual. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked steady, but inside I was bracing for impact. And there he was, Leon. Except not the Leon I remembered. This version looked smaller somehow, thinner, unshaven. His once proud posture bent like he'd been carrying his own regret too long. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow. When he saw me, his lips parted like he didn't believe I was real. Bethany, he said softly, voice hoarse, you look incredible. I didn't answer that. I crossed my arms. What are you doing here? He gave a weak laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. I know I shouldn't have just shown up, but you've been ignoring my messages and I needed to see you in person. I kept my tone flat. You needed to see me. For what, Leon? To apologize. To fix your mess, or to feel better about what you did. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Bethany, please. I know I screwed up. I was stupid. I thought Chloe was different, fun, exciting. But she's a nightmare. Controlling, manipulative. Everything I accused you of being, she actually was. For a moment, I just stared at him. He was trying so hard to look sincere, but all I could see was the man who once called me predictable in front of a room full of people. Leon, I said quietly, do you hear yourself? You don't want me. You just hate being alone. His expression cracked. That's not true. I miss you. I miss how peaceful things were. You were my home. The words landed like a punch. Not because I believe them, but because there was a time I would have done anything to hear them. But now they just sounded empty. I took a deep breath. You humiliated me, Leon. You said I wasn't enough. And now because the chaos you chased turned on you, you expect me to patch you up. That's not love. That's convenience. His jaw tightened. You've changed. You used to be so forgiving. No, I said, stepping closer. I used to be afraid. Afraid that if I didn't forgive, I'd lose you. But I already did. And I survived it. He looked down, voice trembling. I don't know how to fix this. You don't, I said simply. Because I don't need it fixed. For a second, I thought he might cry. His shoulders shook, his eyes glassy. So that's it. You're just going to walk away after everything. I nodded. Yes. Because walking away was the only thing you taught me to do right. He stepped forward, desperate now. Bethany, please. I'm begging you. I don't have anyone else. You were always the kind one. Don't turn your back on me, too. I stared at him, really looked. At the man who once called me safe, now begging for the safety he destroyed. Kindness, I said slowly, isn't the same as self-sacrifice. I can care about what happened to you and still refuse to let you back into my life. His voice broke. You're heartless. I almost laughed. No, I just stopped bleeding for people who enjoy watching me hurt. We stood there in the middle of the lobby, two ghosts of a past that had burned out long ago. Then I turned my heels, clicking on the tile, and walked away. The elevator doors slid shut between us, and for the first time in years, I felt truly untethered. Not angry, not even sad, just free. Back in my office, I sat at my desk, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. He had come looking for closure, but all he'd really done was remind me how far I'd come. And deep down, I knew it wouldn't be the last time he tried. People like Leon never handle losing control. But I wasn't his safety net anymore. I was my own anchor. Weeks passed after that confrontation, and something in me shifted permanently. It wasn't just relief, it was a quiet, blooming strength that wrapped itself around my life like morning light through open blinds. Work thrived. Clients requested me by name now. I led presentations instead of assisting them. My name appeared on the company's website as lead designer, and seeing it there bold official made my chest tighten in the best way. At the gym, people started recognizing me. The trainers nodded when I walked in. The woman at the front desk once said, "You've really transformed Bethany. You look like someone who doesn't let anything get to her." I smiled. That's the goal. But I won't lie. There were moments when the past still flickered. When a song from that party played on the radio. When I passed a cafe where we used to sit for hours planning a life that never happened. But instead of aching, those memories now felt like dust I'd brushed off. Then one evening it happened. I was mid-deadlift set, sweat dripping down my back, music blasting in my ears, when I saw him. Leon, standing near the entrance, scanning the room, looking lost in a place where I now belonged. His hair was unkempt clothes, hanging loose on a thinner frame. His eyes darted around until they landed on me. And in that instant, I saw it, the shock, the recognition, the regret. He hesitated, then walked over, weaving through the machines until he stood a few feet away. I didn't stop my reps. I finished the set calm and steady before setting the bar down. "Bethany," he said softly, "you've changed." I wiped my forehead with a towel, looking at him evenly. That tends to happen when you stop carrying someone else's weight. He flinched, but tried to recover with a smile. "You look amazing." "I mean, wow. I always knew you had this in you. I just didn't care to see it," I interrupted. He looked down, shame washing over his face. "I deserve that." Then quietly, "Chloe's gone. Took everything I had. My savings, my laptop. I'm sleeping on a friend's couch. I don't know where to start." I folded my towel neatly, keeping my tone even. "You'll figure it out. You always said you wanted to live fearlessly. This is what that looks like." He stepped closer, desperation creeping in. "Please, Bethany, don't do this. I know I don't deserve your help, but I can't stop thinking about how good we had it, how stable things were with you. You were right about everything." For a moment, I studied his face, the same face that once sneered at me for being too predictable. And suddenly I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, just an odd kind of clarity. "Leon," I said quietly, "do you remember what you told me that night? That you needed excitement? That I was too safe, too boring?" He nodded weakly. I smiled, small calm, unshakable. "Well, here's your excitement. Consequences, uncertainty, the thrill of losing everything. Enjoy it." His eyes widened, hurt flashing across his face. "You've changed," he repeated this time like an accusation. "I have," I said. "I learned that love without respect is just dependency dressed up as passion. You taught me that." Around us, the gym hummed with energy weights, clanging trainers calling out encouragement. The world kept moving indifferent to his misery. I picked up my water bottle, slung my gym bag over my shoulder. He reached out suddenly, fingers brushing my arm. "Please don't walk away again. I can be better. I'll change." I stepped back. "That's the difference between us, Leon. I did change. You just regret it." And with that, I turned and walked away. The trainer passing by gave me a grin. "Nice form on those lifts today, Bethany." I nodded, smiling faintly. "Thanks. Took a lot of practice." Behind me, I could feel Leon's silence, the kind that comes when someone finally realizes they've lost their power. By the time I reached the parking lot, the air felt lighter. The night sky stretched wide and endless above me. I stood for a moment looking up and whispered not to him, but to myself. "You're not the woman he left. You're the woman who outgrew him." And for the first time since that awful night at the party, I laughed. Not bitterly, not broken, just softly, freely. People always talk about revenge like it's some grand act, but sometimes the most poetic revenge is no revenge at all, just living better, full, unapologetic, untouchable. So I drove home with the windows down, wind tangling my hair, music loud and alive. The city lights blurred into gold streaks, and my reflection in the windshield didn't look sad anymore. It looked whole. And as I pulled into my street, I whispered the truth I'd earned the hard way. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's living like they never mattered. My name is Marianne Potter. I'm 29 years old, and the night I proposed to the man I loved was the night I learned how fast a heartbeat can turn to silence. I'd spent 3 weeks planning every detail because that's who I am. I build things, houses, bridges, moments. My friends joke that I even schedule my emotions. Maybe they're right. But love, I thought, was one thing worth building carefully. And Alex, he was the foundation I trusted. That evening, the rooftop shimmered under strings of warm fairy lights. The city below glittered like scattered gold dust, and the air smelled faintly of grilled rosemary chicken. Our closest friends filled the terrace, glasses, clinking music drifting. I'd coordinated everything right down to the playlist that would start when I adjusted my earring. Mia was there too, my best friend since college. She was radiant in her crimson dress, laughing easily, floating between groups. She'd helped me plan every second. When I caught her eye across the crowd, she flashed me a thumbs up. I thought it meant good luck. Later I realized it meant game over. Alex arrived late, looking effortless in his black shirt, his sleeves rolled up. The kind of man who never seemed to need to prepare because charm was stitched into his DNA. He kissed my cheek distractedly, already glancing at his phone. I told myself he was nervous. He'd sensed something special tonight. I refused to see the truth that his eyes were lit by messages that weren't from me. We sat through dinner, laughter echoing around the long table. I barely tasted the food. My mind kept jumping to the small velvet box hidden in my purse. I touched it under the table, feeling the steady pulse of its secret. My fingers trembled. When dessert plates were cleared, I caught Mia's gaze. My cue. She nodded. I stood my chair, scraping the tile softly. Conversations died down. Phones discreetly lifted. I felt their anticipation hang in the air like perfume. The soft notes of our song began to play. I walked toward Alex. He looked confused at first, a lopsided grin forming, as if he thought this was a toast. Marianne, what? Before he could finish, I dropped to one knee. A collective gasp rippled through our friends. The city lights shimmered off the ring as I opened the box. My voice came out steady, rehearsed, yet trembling at the edges. Alex Hale, you've made my life bigger, braver, louder. I don't want to keep imagining a future without you. Will you marry me? For one perfect heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then he laughed. At first, it was small, awkward, disbelieving. Then it grew loud enough to drown out the music. Oh my God, he said, covering his face. You're serious. Every sound vanished. The laughter hung there, sharp as broken glass. I don't understand, I stammered, the ring trembling in my hand. He exhaled, still smiling in disbelief. Marianne, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. Something inside me snapped quiet. The friends around us shifted, unsure whether to laugh or look away. I heard Mia's nervous giggle, that same lilting sound she made when caught doing something wrong. Embarrassing myself, I repeated, barely a whisper. Alex's smile faltered. He looked over my shoulder toward the crowd. His eyes softened. Mia, he called. The name hit like a stone to the chest. My hand went numb, the ring box slipping from my grasp and thudding onto the tile. Mia stepped forward, hesitating only a moment before standing beside him. Her hand brushed his arm, too familiar, too casual. My body forgot how to breathe. Wait, I said, shaking my head slowly. What is this? Mia's lips parted, trembling with false sympathy. Marianne, we didn't mean for it to happen. Didn't mean, I laughed once, a hollow cracking sound. You helped me plan this. Alex rubbed the back of his neck. It's not her fault. We just connected. You're amazing, but you're always planning everything. I needed something real. Real, my voice was barely audible. You mean secret. Someone's phone camera blinked red. Somewhere a glass shattered. None of it mattered. The world had shrunk to the two of them, the man I loved and the friend I trusted, standing together under the fairy lights I'd hung to celebrate our love. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the ring or demand answers. The silence inside me was heavier than any sound could be. I bent down, picked up the fallen box, and closed it carefully. The click echoed through the still night. Alex reached out. Marianne. I stepped back. Don't. He froze. For the first time, his easy confidence cracked. I looked at both of them, their faces, their trembling hands, their guilt dressed up as pity. "Congratulations," I said quietly. "You deserve each other." Then I turned and walked away, past the table of stunned friends, past the waiters pretending not to stare, through the rooftop doors and down into the dim hallway. The city noise faded behind me, replaced by the low hum of my own heartbeat. In the elevator mirror, my reflection looked almost peaceful eyes, dry, lips calm like a statue that hadn't yet learned how to break. I clutched the closed velvet box in my palm, its corners digging into my skin until it hurt enough to remind me I was still alive. When the doors opened onto the street, the night air hit me like a slap. Somewhere above, laughter drifted faintly from the rooftop, hers, maybe both. I didn't look up. That night I drove home with my headlights off for half a block, letting the darkness swallow me. Then I turned them back on, one by one, like relighting a life that refused to stay extinguished. By the time I reached my apartment, the ring in my hand felt like a stone pulled from a grave. I set it on the counter beside his half-finished mug of coffee and whispered to the empty room, "You won't haunt me." The silence didn't answer, but for the first time it listened. The morning after felt like walking through fog made of glass. Every breath cut a little, every movement echoed too loud. The bed still held his shape. The pillow smelled like his cologne cedar and smoke. I stripped the sheets before I could think throwing them into a black trash bag. No sorting, no folding, just erasure. My name is Marianne Potter, and if I couldn't plan love, I'd plan the demolition of it. I brewed coffee I wouldn't drink. I opened the blinds and let too much light in because grief hates sunlight. Then I sat at my desk, the one I used for designing homes, and wrote a list. At the top, reclaim control. Below it, 4 tasks. Block Alex. Block Mia. Pack everything that carries their fingerprints. Change the locks. That was all. Not a plan for revenge, not even closure. Just logistics, because logic was the only lifeboat I had. I started with the phone. His name, once at the top of every call log, now hovered there like a ghost. Block. The phone asked if I was sure. Yes. Then Mia. Blocking her was faster. It didn't even ask me if I was sure. I wish hearts came with that option. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, but everything else had stopped. I walked to the bedroom and opened the closet. Half of it was his shirts, jackets, a tie I'd picked out for our first anniversary. The smell of him rose like smoke from a fire that had long since burned out. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body had frozen grief into precision. I pulled out an empty box and started packing shirt cologne, watch cufflinks, all folded without thought. I didn't even pause when I reached a framed photo of us laughing at the beach. Into the box it went. It took 3 hours. By the end, 6 boxes stood by the door like silent witnesses. I snapped a photo and sent it to Rachel, our mutual friend, the one least likely to twist my words into gossip. "His things are ready. Tell him to send someone to pick them up. Do not give him my new address." Her reply came within seconds. "Marianne, are you okay?" I didn't answer. I turned my phone face down and walked to the bathroom. The mirror stared back, unkind but honest. I looked composed. Too composed. It's funny how devastation can look like control when you're trying hard enough. At 2:17 a.m., I called a locksmith. He arrived groggy, rubbing his eyes, muttering about emergency fees. While he worked, I packed a duffel bag, just essentials. Laptop, running shoes, one photo of my parents. When he handed me the new keys, I stared at them like they were relics of a new religion. A new start, a new rule, they no longer exist. The next week dissolved into patterns. Work, gym, sleep, repeat. My body was a machine powered by caffeine and resentment. The pain dulled, transforming from sharp agony to something quieter, a steady ache that hummed beneath my skin. At the gym, I learned to breathe again. The rhythm of the treadmill replaced the rhythm of his voice. Every step felt like scraping away a layer of him. I'd run until my lungs burned and my thoughts went blank. One night while running, I caught my reflection in the window, a ghostly outline of a woman I didn't recognize. She looked stronger, even if she didn't feel it yet. I whispered to her, "Yay, you're still here. That's enough." Work helped too. Architecture is about rebuilding, turning chaos into order. I poured myself into a new project, sketching late into the night, hands steady, while the rest of me wasn't. Still, sometimes I'd wake at 3 a.m., convinced I heard his laugh in the hallway or her perfume in the elevator. I'd sit up heart-pounding only to find the apartment still and foreign. Healing isn't noble, it's repetitive. It's deleting old playlists and realizing one of them was still called Our Song. It's hearing the first few notes and skipping it before the lyrics can bruise you. A month passed. The apartment began to look like mine. No trace of him left. Even the air felt cleaner. But peace is a tricky thing. It hides where guilt can't reach, but regret still can. I caught myself wondering not about them, but about me. How did I not see it? How do two people betray you right in front of your eyes, while you're busy decorating the stage for your own heartbreak? One night, sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, I found the velvet box again. The ring gleamed under the soft lamplight. It was beautiful, cruelly so. I opened it once, then closed it, listening to that same sharp click. It sounded less like an ending this time, and more like a door locking shut. I placed it in a drawer, not as a keepsake, but as evidence. Proof that I could survive the worst night of my life and still wake up to mornings that asked nothing from me, except that I keep breathing. I didn't forgive them. I didn't hate them either. They were simply gone. And in their absence, I felt something strange, a small, quiet space inside me where love might one day grow again. But not for them. Never for them. It had been 5 weeks since the rooftop. I could measure time by the small milestones of forgetting. The day I no longer checked my phone in the mornings expecting his name, the day I threw out his leftover shampoo, the night I realized the silence in my apartment no longer scared me. I thought I was getting better, until the ghost came back this time through the phone. It was a Tuesday morning, humid and heavy. I was at the gym halfway through a run sweat slick, on my skin lungs burning, in a way that felt like control. My phone buzzed on the treadmill console. At first I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. Unknown number. For 1 second, my heart did a stupid thing it hoped. I slowed the treadmill. The message preview glowed. Unknown. We need to talk. 3 words. Ordinary, harmless. Except nothing about them felt harmless. I didn't answer. I increased the speed and kept running, pounding the belt until my legs screamed. But my mind kept replaying those words like a bad song I couldn't shut off. When the next message came, I was already expecting it. Unknown. What you did was cruel, Marianne. You humiliated me. A laugh escaped my throat before I could stop at a sound so sharp the woman beside me turned. He was saying I'd humiliated him. The treadmill whirred louder, drowning out the bitterness in my chest. I finished my run hit stop and stood still while the machine slowed. My reflection in the gym mirror looked calm, but my pulse was hammering. I picked up my phone. Another message lit up the screen. Unknown. You pushed me away. You were obsessed with planning everything. I just wanted to feel alive. There it was. The script I'd seen 100 times in the movies he used to make me watch. He'd rewritten the story. I was no longer the woman betrayed. I was the villain who drove him into someone else's arms. I didn't respond. I set the phone down on the console and wiped my face with my towel. Then another message buzzed in, faster, almost frantic. Unknown, it wasn't supposed to happen like that. Unknown, Mia said you'd understand. Unknown. Can we just talk? Please. I took a long drink of water, letting the cold spread through me. My hands were steady. My voice when I finally spoke to no one was even. No, Alex. We don't talk anymore. I tapped the screen. Block number. The button turned gray. It was the easiest decision I'd ever made. I walked out of the gym into the late morning sunlight. The city noise hit me like a living thing, cars honking, people laughing, the scent of coffee drifting from the corner cafe. It all felt clean, real, uncontaminated. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the world was conspiring to remind me of him. The air tasted new. But ghosts rarely go quietly. That night, as I sat on the couch sketching designs for a client, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I ignored it, but the message appeared on my lock screen. Unknown. I can't sleep. I keep seeing you leaving. You didn't even say goodbye. My chest tightened, not from pain, but from something colder. I typed a reply, hesitated, then deleted it. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to know I still bled. Instead, I powered the phone off and placed it face down. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd heard in weeks. Days passed. No new messages came. I almost believed the haunting was over. Then one Friday night, a private number called while I was in bed reading. The ring cut through the quiet like a blade. I stared at it until it stopped. 10 minutes later, a final text appeared. Unknown, I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a long time, letting the words sink in. Then I whispered to the dark I am, "You just wouldn't recognize it." And that was the truth. Happiness wasn't laughter or grand gestures anymore. It was the stillness that came after. It was waking up to a morning untouched by his name. I deleted the message, cleared the call history, and turned off notifications completely. When I went to sleep that night, the last thought I had wasn't about Alex or Mia. It was about something simple, something pure. The way the city looked at dawn when it forgot yesterday's storms. I wasn't healed yet, but I was no longer haunted. 3 months after the rooftop, my phone rang again, this time from a name I hadn't deleted. Lisa Tran, Mia's coworker. The human megaphone of gossip. For a second, I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity, sharp and cold, won. I swiped to answer. Lisa, Marianne. "Oh my God, you actually picked up." Her voice rushed out like a gust of perfume in desperation. "Listen, I know you said not to talk to you, but this is serious. It's about Alex." The name landed like a pebble in water ripples, but no waves. "What about him?" I asked flatly. He's a mess," she said. "Like bad. He and Mia broke up. He's drinking all the time. He got fired from that tech job, and Lisa, yeah, you have 30 seconds. You have." There was a pause, like she hadn't expected a timer on her pity speech. Then she barreled on. "He keeps talking about you. Says he ruined everything. He told me to tell you that he's sorry, that he still loves you." I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair. The ceiling fan hummed above me, cutting the air into even pieces. "That's unfortunate," I said. "Marianne, come on," she pleaded. "He's not the same. He regrets everything. You should at least talk to him." Closure, you know closure. The word people use when they want to reopen the wound just to watch it bleed. "I already had closure," I said quietly. It came the moment I realized I didn't care. Lisa stammered. "He's really hurting. Mia's gone," and I cut her off, voice calm but sharp. "Lisa, do you remember the night on the rooftop? The night he laughed while I was on my knees. The night she stood beside him pretending it was love." The silence on the other end told me she did. I remember she whispered. "Good," I said. "Then remember this too. What you destroy for excitement, you don't get to rebuild for comfort." "Marianne, please, he's miserable. Misery is a teacher," I said. "Let him learn." I ended the call. The last thing I heard was her sharp inhale, like she wanted to stop me but didn't know how. Then I blocked her number. The silence after was thick but not heavy. Just quiet. Necessary. I sat there for a while, staring at my coffee table. On it lay a notepad filled with sketches for a new client's home, a modern cottage overlooking the ocean. I'd written a note to myself in the corner weeks ago, designed for peace, not perfection. For a moment I smiled, because that's exactly what I'd been doing with my life, building something new from the rubble, not perfect but peaceful. Still, the human heart is strange. Even as I smiled, a part of me wondered what had really happened between them. Had Mia betrayed him the way they'd betrayed me? Curiosity is an old habit, but I didn't feed it. I wasn't the same woman who would scroll, stalk, or analyze. I had learned that sometimes indifference is the sharpest knife. Instead, I picked up my pencil and kept sketching. The lines were clean, balanced, controlled. Later that night, I made tea and sat by the window, watching the city lights blink like tired eyes. Somewhere out there, Alex was unraveling, trying to stitch together a narrative where he wasn't the villain. And Mia, maybe she was realizing that excitement doesn't last long when it's built on betrayal. But none of it was my story anymore. That realization didn't come with fireworks or music. It came quietly, like an exhale you didn't know you'd been holding. Forgiveness number piece, yes. At midnight, I wrote in my journal, "Closure isn't a conversation, it's a decision." Then I added one more line because it felt like the truth deserved punctuation. I don't need his apology to stop bleeding. I closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and for the first time in months, I didn't dream about the rooftop. I dreamed of the sea. And in that dream, the water didn't pull me under. It carried me forward. A year had passed since the rooftop, long enough for memories to fade from color to sepia, long enough that I could say his name without feeling it cut. I wasn't healed because of time. I was healed because I had stopped looking backward. That morning, I met a colleague for coffee at a small cafe downtown. It was the kind of place Alex would have hated: minimalist decor, mismatched mugs, no Wi-Fi. I liked that. It made conversation real again. I arrived early, ordered an Americano, and sat by the window. Rain tapped lightly on the glass, turning the street outside into a watercolor of umbrellas and headlights. I pulled out my notebook, ready to review some sketches, when a shadow fell over my table. Marianne, his voice. For 1 second, my body forgot the year that had passed. My pulse stuttered, then steadied. I looked up. Alex stood there, uninvited. He looked smaller somehow, shoulders rounded, eyes dulled. The confidence that used to fill every room he entered had collapsed into something quieter, almost fragile. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair longer, unkempt. I didn't speak. I just placed my pen down and folded my hands. "Can I sit?" he asked. The question wasn't really a question. He was already pulling out the chair across from me. "You look different," he said finally, his eyes searching mine for something familiar. "Good different." I nodded. "I am different." He smiled weakly, the kind that used to melt me. It didn't anymore. "I'm sorry," he blurted out. "I know you probably don't care, but I needed to say it." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Go ahead then." Mia and I, he hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "We broke up months ago. It was a disaster. She's not who I thought she was. I was stupid. I hurt you, and I hate myself for it." I stared at him for a long moment. "What do you want from me, Alex?" He looked down. "Nothing. Just to tell you, I regret everything. I should have chosen you. I should have stayed." His words fell between us like broken glass, sharp, useless. I could have told him how many nights I'd cried until my throat went raw, how his laughter haunted my dreams. But those memories belonged to another version of me. Instead, I asked softly, "Why now?" He looked up, eyes wet. "Because you were right. You said once that I'd realize what I lost. I thought you were trying to guilt me, but you were just telling the truth." I leaned back, letting his confession hang in the air. The cafe around us hummed quietly, clinking cups, low chatter, the soft hiss of steamed milk. Life moved on while he spoke of a past I'd already buried. "I don't want your guilt," I said at last. "I don't even need your apology. What happened between us, it burned everything down, and I rebuilt from the ashes." He winced. "You make it sound so easy." "It wasn't easy," I said, "but it was necessary." He reached across the table, fingers trembling slightly. "Can we start over?" I almost laughed. "Start over. Alex, you and I aren't even the same people anymore. You're a ghost, and I stopped believing in hauntings." The silence stretched between us, thick and final. Then his expression hardened, defensive, angry. "You're so cold," he said quietly. "I remember when you used to look at me like I hung the moon. Now you look right through me." I met his gaze evenly. "That's because the man I loved isn't sitting here. He died on that rooftop when he decided to humiliate me for sport." He flinched. The words landed clean. I reached for my bag, stood up, and draped my coat over my arm. "I hope you find peace, Alex. Just not in my direction." I turned toward the counter. As I did, the door opened, and there was Lucas, my colleague, waving from the entrance. He saw the tension immediately, his brows knitting. "All good?" he asked softly. "Yes," I said, slipping my notebook into my bag. "Just closing an old chapter." When I looked back, Alex was staring at me with something I'd never seen before, complete powerlessness. "Marianne," he said, standing halfway, "I did love you." I paused, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted the final word to belong to me, not him. "I know," I said. "That's what makes it tragic." Then I left. As the cafe door swung shut behind me, I heard the faint scrape of his chair and maybe a muffled sob. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city smelled fresh, washed clean. I walked beside Lucas toward the next block, the sound of our steps calm and steady. Freedom doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives disguised as a quiet walk on a wet street, your past sitting alone behind a fogged window. That was the moment I realized something vital. I hadn't just survived Alex. I'd outgrown him. 6 months after the cafe, I was standing on top of a mountain that smelled of pine and rain. The sky was endless, streaked with violet and gold. The air was thin enough to sting my lungs, but the ache felt alive, earned. Almost there, Lucas called from a few steps ahead, his grin breaking through the fog like sunlight. His hand reached back for mine, steady and warm. I took it without hesitation. It still amazes me how peace can arrive in such quiet ways. No grand entrances, no lightning strikes. Just someone who walks beside you instead of ahead of you. We'd met months earlier through work, a joint project between his firm and mine. He was everything Alex wasn't, grounded, kind, unshaken by silence. He never filled empty spaces with noise. He let them breathe. Somewhere between late-night sketches and shared coffee breaks, the spaces between us began to close naturally, without planning or performance. It wasn't fireworks, it was gravity. Now on this mountain, we reached the summit just as the sun dipped low. The world fell away beneath us, rolling forests, distant lakes, ribbons of road catching the light. I turned slowly, letting the wind whip through my hair. "This is it," Lucas said softly. "Your kind of view-structured chaos." I laughed, the sound genuine and easy. "And your kind of peace somehow quiet and loud at the same time." He squeezed my hand, his eyes reflecting the fire of the sunset. "Marianne," he said, "I'm glad you didn't stop believing in love." "I didn't," I replied. "I just stopped believing it had to hurt." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind moved through the trees below, and a hawk circled far above, free, unbound. My chest felt full in a way it hadn't in years. I stepped closer to him, my fingers brushing the small box hidden in my jacket pocket. I had carried it up the trail all morning, its weight both terrifying and comforting. "Lucas," I said quietly. He turned to me curious. There's something I want to do." I dropped my backpack to the ground, heart thudding with that old familiar rhythm, the same one I'd felt a year ago under fairy lights. But this time it wasn't fear or desperation, it was clarity. I took a slow breath, knelt on the sun-warmed rock, and pulled out the box. Lucas blinked in surprise. "Marianne, what are you?" "Don't interrupt me," I teased, smiling. My voice trembled, but not from uncertainty. I opened the box. The ring wasn't flashy, just a small raw diamond set on a slender band. Honest, unpolished, real. The last time I knelt like this, I began my voice catching on memory. I lost everything I thought love was. I thought I was building forever. Turns out I was just decorating a cage. Lucas's eyes softened. "Marianne." I shook my head gently. "This time is different, because I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for partnership. For quiet mornings and stupid inside jokes, and a life that doesn't need an audience." I held up the ring. "Will you marry me?" For half a second he didn't move. Then he knelt too, facing me, laughing through a breath that turned into something close to tears. "Yes," he said, 1,000 times yes. I slid the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly, as if the world had been saving the right moment for me to get it right. He pulled me up, wrapping his arms around me as the wind howled and the horizon blazed orange. When he kissed me, it was nothing like the cinematic kind that used to make my heart ache. It was quiet, sure. A promise whispered instead of shouted. And in that instant, the old rooftop flickered in my memory, not as pain, but as proof. The girl who had been humiliated under fairy lights had become a woman standing above the clouds, unashamed, unbroken, unafraid. I looked at Lucas and smiled. "The view's not bad." He grinned. "Told you it was worth the climb." As the sun sank behind the ridge, I took one last glance at the world below the glittering city lights in the distance. The hum of life continuing, indifferent, and infinite. A year ago, I'd walked away from love under a storm of laughter and betrayal. Now I was walking toward it under a sky of light and wind. Some stories end with revenge. Mine ended with release. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living beautifully.